time to get started. It is Friday, and of course, we are here in the Nutmeg Tavern. So that means we are live in the Nutmeg Tavern. And we've got our nutmeg, because it's not a Nutmeg Tavern unless you have your nutmeg and you are actually scratching it. And hopefully you've got your tea or coffee or whatever beverage your choice it is. Hopefully it's a Nutmeg Tavern mug. And then you've got some nutmeg and you can do the thing. Welcome everyone in from all over the world. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern. There's plenty of room in here. It's nice and warm. And we've got a fun topic to talk about today. And we are talking about, well, obviously, pewter. You saw it in the, unless you didn't see it, the thumbnail, the title, hopefully you got notification. If you didn't get notification, make sure to find that bell icon thing and tell it to tell you. I don't know, YouTube. What can I say? It's not what it used to be. I mean, it would even like email you if you really wanted notification, but they got rid of that. So today's topic on pewter is one that is virtually non-existent today. You don't go to the store and you buy pewter items, right? But it was incredibly popular in the 18th century and before the 18th century. In fact, right after I popped up the title and told people, Robert Thorpe popped in. He sent me an email that said, "Oh, if you're going to talk about pewter, don't forget." And he gave me some fun little things. So thank you, Robert Thorpe, for that little email. And it is a long and it is a big topic. We are obviously just going to skim right over the top. We're going to look at some pictures. I've got some items here. And we're going to talk about this whole sort of industry that was going on and well into the 19th century that is virtually non-existent today. There are a few. Did you happen to put a link down to? Yeah. There are some links down to some modern high-end pewterers that still exist in places like England today. But for the most part, it is not an everyday household item. Pewter generally is it's a very generic term, and it can mean a lot of different things. It is generally an alloy of metals, being in the most part, in the time period, a mix of lead and tin. Didn't have to have lead in it, but tin is one of the major constituents of pewter, along with lead in the time period. And it is an alloy or a metal that has very, very long history, going back into the Romans. So it was probably a lot more expensive in the time period because tin, while it's fairly easy to get in some places, it's actually very, very condensed areas on the earth where you can find tin easily. And amazingly enough, tin was abundant in the British Isles, especially places like Cornwall and Devon would have tin mines. So a lot of that Roman tin, or possibly all of that Roman tin, was coming from places like that, which seems, it's like a long way to, go and grab your tin. Today, a lot of tin comes out of South America in places like Bolivia. So there are some other deposits around the world. I think some in Southeast Asia, but that's where the bulk of tin is coming from. And tin is pretty expensive these days. If you want to buy tin, I don't know what the spot price is, but it's probably running between $15 and $20 a pound. And probably getting more expensive if it's anything like silver, right? It does come along with some other metals at times. So if you have a tin mine, you might get other metals at the same time, possibly things like copper or whatever. I didn't study that really, in depth there. But some things are called pewter today, which aren't truly pewter. Like this item here is a modern reproduction of a pewter piece. And this is using a modern alloy that is basically aluminum and zinc. So Zamac or a zinc aluminum alloy that has some of the same look as pewter, but it's very, very hard compared to pewter, and well, it gives you the kind of a look. And we do sell some items out of that material, sometimes called Pewter X or Arm and Tail, or several different proprietary things. They call it pewter. It's not really pewter, but coming close to that pewter look. And of course, it's much safer and less expensive because aluminum and zinc are much more abundant on the Earth's surface. Were you going to chime in with a spot price of tin?
Yeah, it was 10 to 11 right now.
Okay, there we go. So, so in the time period, very, very high-end pewter is going to be mostly tin. So something like what they might call Britannia metal, a kind of pewter, would be 96% tin, maybe 3.5% of antimony and 0.5% copper. So there are lead-free versions of pewter. Again, they would be very high-end, especially in that time period. It was an interesting piece. Here, it's here in the Pewterware. I don't. This is from the Book of Trades,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. That was mid 18th century.
They usually, I think there's a couple different editions. Some
Right.
are late 18th and some are early 19th. I think this was a late 18th century edition.
Right. So here's what he's explaining here. It says he uses a word, I don't even know if it is a word. Let's say pewter is an alloy. He means a metal that's made up of multiple different factors, basically. That which is called plate metal is said to be formed of tin and regulus of antimony in the proportions of 112 pounds of the former to 6 or 7 pounds of the latter. So this would be a very, very high-end pewter being made of, if we kind of get this down into a normal proportions, let's say about 92%, or I don't know exactly what the formula would be, but low 90s tin and maybe 6 or 8% of antimony. For a little while, when we were doing pewter buttons, I had an alloy of 92.8 that we were using, and the 92.8 pewter was very hard. So we would make the buttons on a big sprue, and you drop it on the floor and the buttons would just fly off. It was very brittle. But the normal pewter that we use is 96 tin, 3.5 antimony, and that little half copper. That is very malleable and will not just snap and break in that same kind of way. But here he's talking about when the normal metal, which is much inferior and less expensive, has lead in it. And sometimes that lead mix is as much as, it's hard to say, I don't know if he has it here, but contains no more than 20 or 30% tin, and the remainder is lead. So very, very lead heavy. So you go from some pewter, which is almost all tin, to almost all lead. And that one light is on back there if you want to pop that. So that kind of metal would be very inexpensive in the time period. And interestingly enough, even here in the middle of the 18th century, they knew that lead was poisonous. But they were worried here about trying to find out what happens with pewter and whether or not having lead in that is very poisonous. Now, we have all kind of heard that idea that one of the reasons why they thought tomatoes were bad was because it would have tomatoes on like a pewter plate or something, and it would bring the lead into the food, and they were thinking that was the reason why the tomatoes were bad, because it was pewter. Now, I'm not sure if that's truly true or not. Here's a little experiment that they did in the time period. He says, but as lead is well known to be a very noxious metal, experiments have been made to ascertain in what proportion it may be mixed with tin without injury to the liquors for which pewter is commonly used. It has been found when wine or vinegar are allowed to stand in vessels composed of an alloy of tin and lead that the tin is first dissolved, whilst the lead is not acted upon by the liquors except at the line of contact of air and liquor, and that in no sensible quantity of lead is dissolved, even by vinegar, after standing some days in a vessel that contains no more than 18 pounds in the 100 of lead. Let's see, so let me reread that line here. Vessels that contain no more than 18 pounds in the 100 of lead. So that means 18 pounds of tin in the 100 of lead. So 80-20, basically, which would be a very heavy lead mix. Hence it is concluded that as no noxious effect is produced by the very minute quantity of tin which is dissolved, pewter may be considered as perfectly safe, which contains about 80% for measure, as much less tin may be used. But it has been found that common pewter at Paris contains no more than 20 to 30% of tin, and the remainder is lead. It's hard to understand. It's like, I'm not sure what you mean by the proportions. Anyway, they were concerned by the lead in their pewter. It could be that what he really means is the flip there, that if it was 80 tin and 20 lead, it isn't poisonous. But in France, they make terrible pewter.
I imagine, being English, that's probably right.
I'm thinking that's what he's probably saying there. So that is kind of a quick concept of what's going on with the metal itself and what they thought in the time period. Now today, of course, if we do pewter things, it has no lead in it whatsoever. We don't put up with any lead in our food supplies, hopefully. Although, well, there's still plenty of towns with lead pipes in them, including this one. So anyway, let us look at some of the items that we have images of, and then I'll show you some of the pieces in the collection here. Wait, why should you give me that look?
I was just waiting for the cue to flip up the slides. That was all.
Gotcha.
That was why I was giving you an intense look. There you go.
I got a very intense look there for a second. Like, help, deer in the headlights. Here is of course, there were many still lifes in the time period, generally Dutch still lifes, and they are a lot of times generally food related, and if they're food related, the pewter items might show up. And so this wonderful Dutch still life, undoubtedly Dutch, has some pewter items. Before we jump into the pewter items, so doesn't that raised crust pie thing look really cool?
Yes, I would like to eat some right now.
Yeah, it looks very, looks like a nut pie or something. Maybe it's got yucky stuff in it. Hey, no, go back there. Somebody's quick on the trigger there. So we've got a pewter pitcher and probably pewter plates. They could be something else, but I'm guessing that they're pewter plates. Probably spun metal, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And we have a pewter spoon, classic pewter spoon going on there. If anything lasts in pewter items, it's the spoon. We have many examples of spoons. Some of these other items might have disappeared. Notice though, if we look closely at the pitcher item, we can see the spout of the pitcher is towards us, and it has a very kind of small hole. So this gives us a little bit of idea about how that particular piece was cast, and the idea that they actually drilled that out instead of casting it hollow, which can be difficult to do in the time period depending on what the equipment the person has. And even doing a vessel like that, casting it all in one piece, is very, very difficult. So the handles would be cast separately, the lid is cast separately, the spout is cast separately, and the body is probably cast in two pieces. We will see some of that in the near future. And here is some of our main constituent components in their native state. So there's some tin ore called cassiterite. Did I get that right, you think?
I didn't actually look at the pronunciation.
Cassiterite. I'm gonna say.
Don't worry,
for
they'll tell
us,
us if that's the wrong way.
yeah, you'll tell me, I'm sure. But we can see that we have the ore as a sort of a crystal that is connected to another piece of rock, probably quartz. But on the other side there, we've got native lead, which in this case looks like it's an actual pure lead nodule. That is not necessarily an ore, although sometimes we do have lead ores in the native state that have to be purified, refined. There's a word I'm looking for, but it's not coming to my mind. Smelted is the word I'm looking for. And then down at the lower panel there, we have a pure antimony block of metal. Again, I am not sure about its how often it's in the pure state or how often it's in an ore that's mixed. But antimony is an interesting sort of quasi-poisonous metal. It's odd that, you know, we still use it in these things. It's like, well, it's lead-free. It's got some other kind of poison
A little bit of
in it.
antimony, but you know.
But like an antimony pill, I think it's antimony that was the everlasting pill. It was an emetic. It would make you throw up. So the doctors would have this little metal pill. You would swallow it.
Right.
You would throw up. You would
They
get
have
the
their
pill
pill back again.
You'd have the pill back, and a family would keep the same pill in the family for years and years. Right? It's like, oh, it's time for you to throw up. Eat this.
There you go.
Blurp, and then get it back. So there are most of our copper is many times in it. Sometimes in the modern tin alloys, you will also find a little bit of silver, like 0.5% of silver. Here is a mine, and Lauren was doing she just found this image, and she said, oh, I wonder about this mine, and so she did some more research. This is a copper mine that existed and was mined for more than 1,000 years.
It was from the 10th century
From the
to
10th century.
1992.
Right. So like 1,000 years of mining copper from this mine. It's in Sweden?
It's in Sweden.
Sweden.
Yeah.
And we can see here in the 18th century context how can you imagine working in this mine? So you have to carry the fire with you. These guys are carrying torches, or if you are using both hands, carry the torch in your mouth.
Very safe. OSHA approved.
Right.
Sure.
And you can imagine that the torches are eating up the oxygen.
Yeah.
And you're getting soot all over in there. Torches are like the worst efficient way of getting light or anything. It's like, well, you put a bunch of oil on a rag and you wrap it around a stick, and
Perfectly.
just not the best way of working. But we see a little bit of a mine. I'm not sure about the interiors of tin mines. Those, especially in the time period, there are not really very many things to work from.
There weren't a ton of pictures. There was a picture that someone had of somebody pulling up a bucket, and they were crawling up a shaft that was just about as big as the person. It's like this mine's probably a very
airy.
Yes, I don't think most mines actually look like this. The artists need to get down there though, so they used one of the bigger mines.
Yeah. So I'm thinking there was some other kinds of open pit minings, and for tin. Although I am not again versed in the 18th century tin mining technology. Somebody's not paying attention back there.
Sorry,
It's
I
all
keep
right.
getting distracted by looking up about antimony and its toxicity.
There we go. You want to tell us about it?
Well, it says that it is toxic, and its effects, the effects of antimony poisoning are similar to arsenic poisoning, but the toxicity is lower than that of arsenic. So it's like
And sometimes arsenic is even used in alloys, which is always fun. You know, little arsenic never hurt anybody. Very little arsenic. Okay, forget that. I didn't say that. Okay, here is a pewter workshop, and I think we'll have another image too, or is this the one from Diderot's?
This is the one from Diderot's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Diderot's, French, middle to late 18th century, and this is their envisioning of a perfect.
Look at those windows.
Yes, look at those windows.
I'm sure all
clean,
pewters wish they had that big a
Right.
window.
Exactly. We have to remember that these are idealized images of workshops, and here is his idealized workshop of a tin maker. A pewterer, or there are different words for it in the time period. But what somebody is just fast on that button.
You were doing the
You're
pointy
waving.
thing
I am
that
just
you do.
waving my hands. It's all right. I'm talking. I do that. We have equipment along. I'll talk really fast, and maybe she'll think it's not time to flip. We've got some molds and things along the side here. The person on the extreme right-hand side is pouring pewter into a mold, probably for a small plate or something like that. In the back, behind him, obviously, stop looking at me, is where we have fire and such like. For heating up our pewter. The person in the back on that little table is probably got a lever cutter, and he's cutting the sprues off, would be my guess. So every time you cast something like that, it's got a sprue, basically where the metal comes in. You cut that off and you file it and all that. We have a person in the foreground here who is working on like a spout or something. So he's doing finishing work. And then we have somebody working a great wheel and a lathe in the background, and many of the items, if they were round, they would be turned. And I am not sure in the time period whether they did spinning of pewter items or not. But one of the ways to make the finest of the pewter items out of less metal is to actually work from flat sheets that you spin on a lathe and you force them onto a form, and it's I've got some examples here that I will show, but this is a bit like a tin maker's shop. Here are some of the tin pewter maker's tools, and this is a spoon mold of the time period. We have a spoon in the spoon mold in its casted form. It still needs worked on. The top and the bottom, unfortunately, we can't really see the bottom of the inside of the mold as well with this, but you get the idea here. Here are some of the Diderot's plates of showing the tools and some of the items that are being made. Lots of little tools for finishing on the right-hand side. There's the way their metal pot for their melting of the tin, and tin, lead, they all melt somewhere around between 400 and 600 degrees. So a typical pewter alloy might melt and be castable at 500, 550 degrees. You might have some, depending on the alloy and the amount of lead, that would melt at a lower temperature than that. But in the center column, we've got some of the molds. So you can see the spoon mold there represented toward the bottom. There's a fork mold. I have made pewter forks, and they don't really work very well. But
Spoon it is.
yeah, anyway. And then we can see some handles and spout molds up at the top, a little porringer mold. And then if we go on this far left-hand side, we see more complex molds. So again, they show basically this whole picture on the one side. It's like, okay, the lower section of the body is one mold, the upper section is another mold. So to get it hollow, they had to break that in half or make it in two pieces, is what I really want to say. And then they join it later on. So if you look at the almost at the bottom and on the right hand side, you can see the two pieces and how they're saying you put these together, and then you would solder that. And solder is basically lead and tin. It is almost exactly the same material. The problem is that means the body wants to melt when you get the solder melted. So you have to be very, very, very gentle when you're doing your soldering of these pieces together. But the handle comes on and solders separately. The spout can come on there separately. And even the base is cast separately and put on to the piece.
Okay, do you want to maybe drop out for a little bit?
Yeah.
And first, you want to show them the mold and the spoon.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, do I have a spoon mold?
Well, you don't have a spoon mold,
I don't
but you do have the mold.
We
right?
used to sell spoon molds. I don't have any currently. I'm sure I have got one. Can you pop over here to this? Hello. Ding. Here is a button mold, though. Brass, and it's got a spot for the faces of the buttons here, and then you can see how the shanks of the buttons are formed on this. So you put that all together, you pour your pewter in there, you let it cool for, about a second, and then you can pop this open and then take out the buttons, and then you would cut the sprue off. So the sprue would be the part that would be formed by these little openings right here. This way you would just cut them off right there, and then you would have buttons that were ready to finish. And here is a spoon. You can see spoon here. This one's even got the markings on it. I don't think we can see, this one's been finished fairly well, so there aren't very many like mold marks on it. But if we look at, no, can't see any mold marks.
I think on the taller teapot over here,
Right.
I think you can see a solder
yeah.
mark by the handle on this other side.
We'll look at those in a little while. Anyway, you can pop back, Ivy. Are we going back to the Diderot? Or did you
I
want to jump in?
wanted to do a couple of super chats first before we. So, the first super chat is from Mandatory Carry. Working, but I'll catch a rerun. Thank you.
You got to stop that working stuff and be in here on time.
It's a good thing we have the reruns for everybody. And then Truth and Not So Sated sends in 100 Townsend's gift memberships. So thank you.
Thank you.
With a note that says, "This is my favorite channel."
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you a lot.
And then there's a super chat from Speed and Style Tony. A modern product still made from pewter is cast gaming miniatures, although 3D printing is now replacing it. And someone a little earlier was talking about painting the little miniatures, the pewter miniatures. And it was making me think we had a game that just had I think it had plastic figurines, but I don't remember them because Dad cast tiny little pewter ones and we painted them.
Yes,
It was very fun.
I have done that kind of casting. Yes. Okay. Is that
Okay,
it?
yep, we're all
Okay.
caught
Let's
up.
jump back in then. There we go. Here is an earlier 16th century image of a pewter manufacturer, and we can see his goods here in the front. Again, very, very similar things to what they're going to make 200 years later. It really doesn't change that much. We've got some flasks, we've got pitchers and tankards and plates. Essentially the same thing. Now we see somebody casting in the very background, and then we see somebody doing some turning work here. Just like the Diderot's image, really. Somebody at the great wheel turning it, and then the person on the lathe in the foreground. There we go. Some items that are from the 18th century or early 19th century. Classic Philadelphia tankard, somewhere right there at the latter part of the 18th century. One from New York, that's somewhere there in the 18th century. A goblet, a simple drinking vessel, just a tumbler, and then some other kind of tumbler here. Now, notice a couple of these specifically say Philadelphia and New York. There were no tin deposits in usable tin, I'll say it like that. No usable tin deposits in the colonies. In fact, there really isn't any in North America even now. Most tin, the closest that we would find tin would be, say, Mexico. So the pewter that these were made out of was either recycled pewter or the actual pewter stock in, let's say, ingot form would come over from like England, right? Now, that brings me to the idea of recycling tin. One of the reasons, or pewter, I should say. I kind of use those interchangeably when I should be a little more careful. But pewter is one of the easiest items to recycle. So it melts at a fairly low temperature. It doesn't oxidize a ton, and so and the items were generally fairly thick because they were cast. So they might be a quarter of an inch thick at some places, and if the style goes out of favor, or these items are very easy to dent. If the item gets damaged or whatever, you can easily just take the items to the pewter worker and say, I want a new spoon, or I want a new pot, or whatever, and he would just take these and melt them down. And there's basically no loss whatsoever. It is a very easy item to reproduce or to recycle. The problem with it as an historian is that a lot of these items don't exist anymore because, of course, they were recycled instantly, right? So they just keep, reusing that. So we might have plenty of examples of 19th century pieces and not so many 18th or 16th or 15th because they were all recycled and they disappeared and turned into newer items. So we do have to kind of remember that when we're studying these things and looking at what we've got. Made it for a really nice for the end user. Not just the idea that the items disappear is kind of sad. You take us back, and we have another worker here of items, and he's got. We don't see him casting or filing or anything. We actually see him whacking on it with a hammer and one of these little anvils that goes into a little stump anvil or a bick, whatever terminology he might want to use here. Very similar look to what a tin worker might be using in the time period. Why they managed to show it like this, I don't know, because it's not quite as typical. Now, notice right behind his head, that item is a still. And the pewterer might not make the body of the still, but the coil or the worm of the still is one of the classic examples of items that the pewter worker would make. So today we think of stills and we would use something like a copper coil or a copper worm. Pewter was one of the classics in the time period for that. Here is a coffee pot from the 19th century and a chocolate pot from the 19th century. And both of these, even the chocolate pot here, you wouldn't put that on the fire. You'd probably put the already warmed milk or the hot water into these because it melts at a fairly low temperature comparatively. You're going to just put boiling water into them. You're not going to put them right over the fire because it might melt. That'd be bad. This is William Blake art. Almost, is it a cartoon? Would you call this a cartoon?
It's close. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's probably a cartoon. It probably has some other message here. It looks a lot like classic cartoons from the time period. But if we look on the wall behind here, Peter something pewterer, right? And the people here with the doohickeys on their head, they're selling the pewter things in the street. So they've got pewter items stacked up on their heads, which doesn't seem like the best way of doing it, but whatever.
It's visible.
Yes, it's very visible. And we can see some of the items there. Plates, tankards. There is on the top of the taller person, we have like a cistern or possibly like a samovar, like you brew tea in it and then pour it out. But it's probably just a cistern. You might use it for something other than water, but you're going to dispense liquids in it one way or the other. That's what it's for. So there's a little bit of an idea there. Here is a larger existing pewter cistern with some beautiful work on the outer side of it. Not sure exactly how they would have achieved that, whether that was in the, whether it was cast and then it was turned, and then they did the work on making the decorations, sort of engraving there. It's got a little brass spigot there that's poking in the side of it. On the other side, there is a crazy, like, dolphin cistern. I don't even know what's going on with that. It's got, and I'm not sure how you get the liquid in it.
That's a good question.
The little top knot comes off, or maybe there's a hole in the back we can't see.
Probably.
And it's got a little brass spigot also. You know, you gotta have some idea there. Somebody's got to be pretty rich to have some weird thing like that. Here are some trade cards of the time period. It's really hard to read the one on the right because the classic kind of writing in the time period. And by the time it's reproduced and it comes down to us, it's not very readable. But George Stafford Pewterer at the Pewter Dish, the corner of Hemming Row in St. Martin's Lane in the Strand, London. Makes and sells all sorts of the best white hard metalware, commonly called French pewter. Things like vis-a-vis, water plates, covers, teapots, etc., with all sorts of pewterers' ware wholesale and retail at reasonable rates. Don't I wish I could visit his shop today?
I would love to go there.
Let's look at some of these things. We've seen teapots, and but let's look at the next slide. So, what happened? Everything went away.
Hold on. Uh-oh.
Something happened.
This could take a minute.
Yeah.
Hold on.
We're getting there. I wonder who's in charge of the console today. Somebody doesn't have the right experience. She'll get there. There we go. So the one on the left-hand side is a water plate. And a water plate is actually a regular plate on top. It's hinged, and underneath is a larger sort of plate bowl. And what you would do is pour hot water in there. You close that, and it would keep the items on the top of the plate warm. And that's common in the time period, and common to see people talking about them. In this instance, we saw that in the trade card. And then on the other side here is a standard eating plate. Notice all the knife marks. So pewter is fairly malleable depending on its alloy, and so that's one of the bad parts. Is it can easily get dented, it can easily get marked up and scratched, but it can be very, very shiny and look almost like silver. And in many cases, it was very desirable, especially earlier on, to have something that would look so nice. So some alloys of silver, or some alloys of pewter, stay shiny much longer than, say, something like actual silver, which would tarnish very rapidly. So
if you've ever polished silver, is a giant blast.
Yeah, exactly. So pewter is desirable in some ways, even though it was less expensive in some situations. It was very desirable in others. We have a canister for cinnamon. We have a tobacco box here, and notice a little engraving. The tea caddy and the mustard pot, because these items can be cast, because they're very easy to finish. It's soft enough that it's easy to file, easy to polish. You can do a lot of different forms with it and make a very pretty item. Here are some of the little marks that you would get in there that would tell you about who made it and what purity it is, what kind of alloy it was made with. These marks would be required in some places, or else you're kind of selling an unknown object. So there would be regulations. If you're making tinware, hey, you got to put marks in it. Here is a measure on one side, and measures are very important in the time period. You want to get what you paid for, right? And then this is a little jug here on the one side. When they say jug, they might just mean like a mug. We would call it today a mug. Or they had the term jug or pot occasionally when they really meant just a large cup or a mug. Anyway, that one's been all mushed from a shipwreck. But notice that it didn't break into pieces, it just squashed.
It looks totally like a lot of metal that we
Yeah.
would see broken has very sharp
Right.
edges. And this just sort of crumpled.
Right. And even today, you could melt that down and make a new one.
Yep.
I wouldn't suggest it. That would be a bad thing. But.
It's a relic.
Yes. We can also use pewter in small portions to do specialty things. So here on the left-hand side, we have a bottle, and they wanted a screw top on it. Can you imagine a screw top in the 18th century? And so you can do that with pewter. So they like glued a pewter top to it, and of course it's missing the cap. Of course, duh.
Just like all of my.
The knife here in the middle has pewter bolsters and things on the handle. And then, of course, we got this cool Bellarmine jug or mug here with a little pewter top to it. And I like that little clampy handle. It clamps onto the handle and holds the cap on, so that probably we would drink out of it. You can just flip open that and drink out of it. Seems like an odd thing to drink out of, but... Candlesticks, classic item to be made out of pewter. Candles don't get quite hot enough to really melt it, even if it burnt all the way down to the socket. So again, you can make them very beautiful, and you can make them look like silver, even though they aren't. And here's an adjustable candlestick on the right-hand side. We can move it up and down on that, which can be very handy if you're working at a table surface and you want to move your light up. We have a dinner pail with a cover, and this very, very, very interesting sectioned food canister, which reminds me of what you would see in other parts of the world today, made out of something like tin or aluminum, but here it is made out of pewter. This is a German example.
I'm not 100%
I think
sure.
it was.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
It
Very
does seem like
interesting.
something the Germans would do.
And it is, the same way they're made, so that, you have a strap basically that goes up through the whole thing, and it holds them all in place while you're carrying it. And then you can, the strap has got enough room that you can just take each section off and get to the contents. A porringer, so a bowl basically, a small eating bowl. We have a standard bowl and this really cool soap dish. Look closely at that hinge section in the back. We'll see that later on. A syringe. Many of the manufacturers speak specifically of the idea of syringes being made out of pewter. And then we have an 18th century funnel. Again, a classic item for them to mention in their advertisements that they're making funnels. It's not easy to make funnels out of some other items, maybe, but funnels out of pewter is one of the things they did. We have a pewter dish that's highly decorative, pewter dish with a cover over here. A salt shaker in pewter and salt cellars. And a salt cellar is just like an open salt dish. We have an inhaler. So again, medical industry is looking at these things. In fact, these are all kind of in that classification, an inhaler. So I don't know if they're making a hot infusion with water and then you're breathing the vapor out of that, or possibly something else. Why are you smiling?
Just smiling at a joke the chat was telling.
Oh, chat jokes, you guys. A biberon. This is probably for infant, feeding an infant. Putting warm milk or some other liquid drink item in that for a child to drink out of. And then a pap boat, same thing. Pap is a mixture of, say, breadcrumbs and milk, and you would feed a baby with that. You would put it in there, and then it's kind of like a baby spoon, except you just like a trough. I'll fill that kid up one shot, open wide.
When I looked it up, it was also for invalids
Yeah,
or
right.
sick people as well as babies.
There you go. A food bottle, don't ask me exactly what they mean by that, but possibly with the ring, you would put food in there. It's got a screw top, my guess is, and then you would, like you could hook it to a belt or on a strap, and then, when you get where you're going, you would open that up and eat out of it or drink out of it or something. And then we have a bottle or a flask on the right-hand side. Again, another one of those classic examples of things you can make out of pewter. And we have pewter writing things. So these are both ink wells. Both of them have the little cap. There's going to be ink. This one that's on the right-hand side has got two little compartments with those little handles. And the left has exactly the same thing. Two little handles. They might have sand in them or other items. I think the drawers, you might have tools to, carve the tip of your pen in there, maybe other little writing tools, and then ink, of course, in the top. And then we're back. Okay, so let's look at some of the items that I've got here in our collection because I do. So why not? So let's look at, go ahead and pop me onto that little side. There we go. And I'm here someplace. Here's a little toy soldier in pewter from probably the 18th century. He's lost some of his detail, so we can't tell exactly who he is, but somebody who's riding a horse, obviously. You can tell how it's, kind of easy to dent or whatever. This is pretty hard, though. So looking pretty good. There's a toy. And we do have examples of other toys in the time period, like a toy watch with the hands cast solid in there, just for looks. Here's the 18th century spoon. We can get some nice detail out of the handles with this. And this one's still in very good shape for being probably an 18th century piece. You can see the markings there on it. Let's look at something a little bigger. Here is a pewter plate from the time period, or actually this may be, it's got an engraving here in the back. This may be from the 19th century, or at least the engraving is. Anyway, a classic look for a tin plate, or a pewter plate from the time period. It's like scratches. You can get a kind of a feel for this isn't really, really thick. It's a pretty thin casting. Not easy to do. I have done plenty of casting in my time period, pewter, and not easy to do something that thin. This is a modern reproduction piece of I can't get far enough back. Help! Of a pewter. You get the idea.
I mean, you could just hold it up to the main camera.
Fine. There we go. This piece, classically, again, fairly thin. I'm not sure how they made this particular piece, but definitely modern, although it is pewter. It isn't like stainless steel. This is the modern reproduction, again, made out of Zamac metal, but classic kind of design you would have from the time period. And since we're still here on the big camera, let's look at this here. This is a modern manufacture pewter plate, or tin plate actually. It was made in Bolivia by one of our old suppliers. I don't have them anymore. They disappeared on us, but that's all right. But this is spun metal, so it's fairly thin. So they would start off with flat sheet material and spin it in a lathe and work it up against a mold to get this really, really great period design look out of pewter from the time period. You can pop into this side camera again for me. Another classic spoon of the time period. This is a modern reproduction, but probably molded off of an original spoon. And here's another period piece. So here is a tobacco box. Now, it's really hard there. Oh, I I think I can make it. So you can see it's got a design in the lid that was done as a kind of simple engraving. And you can see how it's got this hinge that's cast into it. So this would be cast as multiple pieces. If we look very close at the bottom here, we can see that it's likely that the bottom was cast separately and then it was constructed. It may have even been constructed out of a strip and soldered together here. So kind of see how that looks like it's been soldered together. So this is probably the bottom, this as a cast strip, the lid, and this portion here, this portion here was probably cast separately, and then it was all put together. So if we look on the inside, we can see this lid has a lip here. Again, if we look really closely, it was probably cast as a separate strip or constructed as a separate strip and soldered on. Sorry, I'm doing it just the very edge. It's hard to get it in focus because it's not made for that. And we can look inside. You can see that it's fairly thick though, fairly thick. So that's a piece, kind of, how they would have constructed that in the time period out of pewter. And I think that's mostly got, I do have this one little guy here. I think that's a little pewter finial that came off of something. And, one last thing. I almost forgot it. Look at that. Ooh. And we have a syringe right there. Don't ask me what this is for. I'm not going to tell you. It's a secret. Anyway, a period syringe made out of pewter. So again, one of those classic items that the pewter would make.
Don't forget the buttons and the
buttons.
continental coin.
Somebody went to all the trouble to get. So now we do sell our coins, our reproduction coins in pewter. Now, the reproduction coins for the most part, or the original coins, were made in silver. But occasionally they made like low-end coins out of pewter. And yes, the colonial dollar at times was made, I believe. I don't have it. This is coming out of my head from 20 years ago. So I believe they did some out of pewter. Again, people said, a pewter coin, that's not worth anything. And they were right. And then we have pewter buttons here. Now, classically, a lot of the buttons were made out of pewter in the time period. We can see how they're cast with these little bosses on the back. And you can make some very, very fun, fancy buttons. Again, it's fairly easy to work this pewter and cast designs directly into them. And then sometimes, like, you got a button like that that's just plain. There we go.
Okay, you ready for some questions?
Whew, I am.
Okay. All right. So, do you know if they had any non-leaded pewter in the time period?
Yes, he talks about that right here. He says, it is generally kept of different standards. So high quality, low quality, cheap, whatever. That which is called plate metal is said to be formed of tin and the regulus of antimony in the proportion of 112 pounds of the former and 67 pounds of the latter, i.e. nothing else. This particular one was just tin and antimony.
There you go. Do you know if they had a way with dealing with lead poisoning during the time period?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Maybe they gave him mercury.
Yeah, this will fix you. I don't know what they would have done, or it's possible that they would actually do something that wouldn't kill you, but I don't have that information off the top of my head. It's a good question.
Okay, you answered that one earlier. Okay, so hold on just a second while I get my super chats. Okay.
Somebody asks whether this guy has a separate needle. No, it does not have a separate needle. This is the working end. That's all.
It's all as fine as it gets.
Yes. Now, sometimes there are a few like recipes that you would like take milk and shoot it into a thing to make it froth, but I don't think that's what this was for.
Okay, so Max Darkula sends in a super chat. I might have missed it, but how are they joining the pewter pieces with solder in the time period? Did they have something like a torch, or did they heat an iron to do it?
Right. I don't have one of the classic soldering irons of the time period, but there are some pictures in that Diderot's. So if you go back and look at that, pop at it, Ivy. Can you find the Diderot's tools picture?
Yep, hold on.
She'll do it. We can trust Ivy to do it. Really, we can. She'll just...
It's not very far into the
Yeah,
list.
it's
There
like
we go.
slide 4. There we go. If you look at the on the right-hand side, nope, the left-hand side, about halfway down there, you know, we've got all these vertical tools, and then we have tools that are going horizontally, and the ones right along the edge there on the left-hand side are various soldering irons. It's basically an iron stick with a handle on it, and then a solid copper piece that is put on the end of that. Those are large triangles, or sometimes, you know, other shapes, but they would basically put those on a brazier. They would put those on a brazier, heat them up, and then they would dip them into, say, you know, a little bit of acid or something, and then into the solder itself. It would kind of pull the solder right up onto the metal, and then you would do the soldering with those. And for some certain soldering, like if you're doing soldering on a roof or something, they use soldering irons like that are still available today.
This is a super chat from Solaris. Hey guys, how fragile was pewter? I assume that it wasn't as robust as other dining and cookware, but I assume that it's a type of metal and not stoneware. So,
right. So pewter is metal, and it's actually it's very hard to damage. Like if you drop it, right, because it bends easily. So it's easy to bend back, and you can work it a lot before you'll break it. It depends on the alloy that it's made out of. This is the 96% tin and 3.5 antimony. If this was 92% tin and 8% antimony, if I did that, it would likely break. So it really depends on the alloy that they're using. But the vast majority of them can get crushed or dented very easily. That's why you'll see, like, classic pictures of this highly dented pewter mug. It can withstand all those dents without breaking. It'll still work. It might rip open a little bit at the bottom, but you could probably solder it closed. Unfortunately, I do have a piece that's a perfect example of that. I just couldn't find it for the live stream. What's new?
hey, we found a lot of pewter stuff for the live stream.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we had some of the toy soldiers, and they some of the finer pieces, like the guy you had, his
Right.
tail's gone. That classic, his tail gets bent 3 times, it's fine, you bend it back.
Boink.
13 times in, he loses his tail.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're all good.
We did it. A really, really good topic, and fascinating in that it is, different than most things that we deal with today. The vast majority of our stuff has been replaced by things like stainless steel. The interesting thing about the pewter is that it doesn't rust like stainless steel. It doesn't really tarnish a lot. It kind of ends up with a patina. I mean, even a piece like this, which is probably 200 years old, while it is darkened somewhat, is still in a lot like its original state. This piece probably has never really been polished, and it is still in very, very good shape. So it is a very interesting metal or metal alloy to work with. And it is versatile in a lot of different ways. It's just that today we have much cheaper things to work with. So we've replaced everything with plastic and with stainless steel, and we've lost something out of it. There are, some specialty things like this that are more interesting, more decorative, or whatever. But, we put up with what we put up with, isn't it? Isn't it true? Are we done? We did it. Great topic. Hopefully, touch base on that soon. This week's video, I believe, will be a marathon on the main channel. It could be the episode that I just did, but I think that will probably be next week because it's a little bit bigger, and I think they're going to have to do some extra editing.
The draft is up, but it is just version 1, so maybe they're going to edit it again. Yeah.
We'll see.
Don't want to rush a masterpiece.
Yeah, someone asks, so is solder, so solder is lead. You can get lead-free solder, but generally, at least back in the day, because we've changed mostly in the last, say, 10 years to lead-free solders in electronics and in everything else. They try to get rid of the lead. A good solder was either 60-40 or 50-50 lead and tin. And very similar to a lot of the basically pewter of the time period. So I want to thank, everyone. I did get to did I get to the Patreon names?
I don't think
I didn't get to Patreon. Oh no, I'm so bad. Brand new and returning YouTube members. And we just had all those gifts. Thank you so much for the gift memberships. Now people can use the cool emojis and all that good stuff. M. Town Zach, Kathleen Healy, Jerry Durr, lap steel guitar, Kelly Krakow, Jeremy Ween, number 27, Dan, here's Daddy Fat Pack Z, great name. Or this one's even better. I think at least it wins the internet for today. I can't believe it's not better. Oh yeah. V. McKim, Darkened Dante, Mookie Schmookie. Again, some just great names. Good job, guys.
Like the mine.
Those are new and renewing YouTube members, and then 2 new Patreon members. Thank you for being Patreon members. Sawyer A and Gleam Glade 47. You guys just hit it out of the park for great names today. Thank you to you folks that are direct. Some people are indirect supporters, and that's great. People who share the video, watch them, comment, whatever. That's just great. But these direct people, Patreon, members, Super Chat, you people, that's the love. That is saying we really love. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren, for the work you did on the live stream, and thank you, Ivy, for putting up with me making you do all those slides and all that good stuff. Super thank you for being a viewer here on the channel today. Whether you're watching it in replay or you're here live, you are the reason why we do this channel. And I hope you have just the best weekend ever. Thanks for watching.